We're now going to move from singing to discussion and now to the panel portion of this morning's event. And with us today are three people deeply involved in being voices in the media, in their communities, as well as in the sports arena. In charge of today's panel is Narelda Jacobs, and Narelda is a Whadjuk Noongar journalist. She's presenter and commentator with a career at Network 10 that spans more than 2 decades. She's a passionate advocate about promoting equality, diversity and inclusion, and she also finds time to do things like a podcast and to act as an ambassador on many great causes. And contributing to today's panel is proud Bangarang and Wiradjuri woman and co-chair of the First Peoples Assembly of Victoria, Aunty Geraldine Atkinson. Now, Aunty Geraldine was elected to the Assembly in November 2019 as a candidate for the North East region. For over 40 years, she has been instrumental in driving government policy and policy reform in Aboriginal education, and she's been deeply involved in the centrepiece of Reconciliation Australia's work in schools through the Narragansett Reconciliation in Education program. Craig Foster is a former Socceroo, broadcaster, adjunct professor, author and human rights activist. Craig advises athlete activism to some of Australia's most prominent sports people and is an adjunct professor in sport and social responsibility at Torrens University. And he's been instrumental in promoting respect for multiculturalism and diversity and is the 2023 New South Wales Australian of the Year. And we also have Semara Jose. Now, Semara is a proud Gujala, Eastern Kuki-Yalanji and Torres Strait Islander woman, and she's the founding member and current chairperson of Deadly Inspiring Youth Doing Good, which is a youth-led non-profit organisation helping young people co-design and lead their own projects. Semara has an extensive background in education across far north Queensland, helping young people grow their leadership skills, and today she leads the innovative growth and strategic direction of Deadly Inspiring Youth Doing Good. Please welcome them to the stage. Thank you, everyone. Narelda, before I hand over to you, I know we're, as co-hosts of The Point, on NITV, coming back tonight at 7:30. Yes. 7:30 on NITV. We get to ask a lot of questions of people, but I might throw a curveball and ask you the first question. We'll get into the panel discussion.
Hit me up.
Just give us your thoughts about this year's theme for reconciliation. What are your thoughts?
Be a voice for generations. In fact, thanks, JP. I wanted to chat this out with Aunty Geraldine, actually, because just recently I've been doing a lot of digging into voices to Parliament that have been in existence over the generations that are no longer here. The National Aboriginal Conference, NAC, ATSIC, we all know ATSIC very well. And Aunty Geraldine, you are on one right now in Victoria, the Victoria People's Assembly. You also knew a lot about ATSIC and also NAC. What were your reflections of that time?
I'm a very old person, by the way. I'm 70, so I've been around a long time. And I remember NAEC, I remember ATSIC. I had brothers and sisters who represented Victoria on ATSIC. ATSIC really was, you know, it had a good structure. It was democratically elected people from local communities at the regional, and then they elected people at the state. And they did some really fantastic work during those years. The one thing that I can say about all of those organisations, those national organisations that we had, I really want to put it out there and say that there was never any real respect from government for those people or for Aboriginal people. And the other thing, the really most important thing that I believed was there was no trust. They could not trust us as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to do the right thing whether it was with funds, whether it was policies, whether it was strategies. I just don't believe there was any trust, and that's why I think those organisations were gone.
Both of those organisations closed the gap while they were in existence, and also brought us closer to Makarrata. My dad was actually instrumental in creating a plan for a Makarrata, which he presented at the United Nations in 1981, before the NAC was abolished, and then ATSIC was abolished. But those organisations brought us closer to treaty, closer to Makarrata, and the truth-telling that goes with it. Victoria is a really great example, because you are a voice. You are now working on treaty in Victoria. The NAC and ATSIC they were the voice, and they worked towards treaties. We need a voice to be able to get to treaty. Would you agree with that?
Exactly. And that's what we did within Victoria. We realised that what we needed was the voice. We needed to be able to have a voice to be able to talk to government in relation to the treaty process that we wanted. We'd had a working group. We worked with government. We co-designed the legislation for advancing the Treaty Act in Victoria. So that was a voice. We were able to do that. Within that, advancing the Treaty Act, we were able to work towards government in agreeing to the elements that would ensure we would get to that treaty journey. Now, those 4 elements were very, very important, and they had to be agreed by government, and we had to make sure, of course, they wanted government, a dispute resolution process in case they had a blue with us. That was there. But we had to have a treaty authority. We had to have a treaty negotiation framework. We wanted so desperately a self-determination fund, so our communities are on level playing field with government when it comes to negotiation treaties. And so they were so very, very important. Along the way, we were able to do and get some other work done was really important. And the part of it was, we talked about our voice. We had that democratically elected voice. What we needed and what we believed from the very beginning was we needed truth. We needed truth-telling. And we negotiated with the government to establish the Uruk Justice Commission so that government, organisations, a whole range of institutions would have to come before that commission and tell their stories and how they impacted on the Aboriginal community in Victoria and all that had happened. That, they directed our lives, really. I always said government impacted my life every bit of the way, and that's what happened. And we wanted that truth to be told, and that's why we so very desperately needed that Royal Commission into truth. So that's it. The voice, truth, and treaty, and we're going to get a statewide treaty this year.
I'll give Aunty Geraldine a big round of applause. Victoria is smashing it under your leadership, and you really are leading by example in Victoria, and it's wonderful to witness and to watch what's happening in Victoria. The Victoria's First People's Assembly is going through its second wave of elections right now. It strikes me that this is the very first time Reconciliation Australia has had a breakfast in this building during National Reconciliation Week, which I think goes to what you were saying about being taken seriously. I mean, you can see that this year there's the gravitas of events like this. And Craig, I think we've made the observation a bit earlier that year after year we have these wonderful events that bring us together, but what do we have to show for it?
I think that's right, and that's the question that we're got to answer this year. We, for the first time in my lifetime, and for many Australians, we have an opportunity this year to actually take a huge step forward. And we're reflecting, sitting here, listening to the extraordinary First Nations leaders in the room, and Aunty Geraldine, and of course we have Tom here, and so many who fought for so many decades. But then, Lions of the Cause came well before them, and you talked about your own father, and you were going back several hundred years here. And to this year, we actually have an opportunity, our generation or generations, to do something substantive. And, this breakfast has been going on since at least 2001, and we saw the video before about 1967. And my message to everywhere I go around Australia and to all of those here at the breakfast this morning is it's time for us to also help pick up the load. Because that's an immense load that's been carried this year by First Nations, to educate Australians on our Constitution, to have truth-telling so that we all understand the imperative to take this important step, and at the same time to educate just around the voice to Parliament itself. And it's time for everyone to step forward now and start to help carry some of that load.
Well, you've been doing that, and you had an opportunity to contribute to the truth-telling during the King's coronation, and you came out really strongly in defence of Stan to say, I'll let you say it in your words. What were you seeing being played out afterwards? I mean, I know that it was a conversation that the panel went for 40 minutes of rolling coverage that went for hours and hours and hours. Even Stan, I heard Stan talking with Tila Reid at the Sydney Writers' Festival and said he was just offering the truth. There was no opinion in what he was saying. He was offering the truth of what happened. And he gets attacked and his words are taken out of context. So in your eyes, what do you think happened at the time and afterwards?
Can I give you my perspective in a moment? Can I just ask you for your perspective that you were going to give us? Like I saw you said the other day that you think this is, Australia has shifted. I think the tectonic plates of Australian society finally are shifting, but I'm interested in your perspective.
Look, I think what struck me was that people either were supportive or they didn't see what was, that they thought it was wrong that the King's coronation be used to offer what they thought was opinion. And when they say that, they mustn't have watched what went to air, because it's based on what they've read in other media outlets, which is actually opinion and commentary based on something that was fact and not opinion. So I think there was so much support that came from all different directions, but there were also a lot of conversations from people that I was surprised to say that it wasn't the time and place. As our friend Tila has said, they're all time and place. It's every time and place. This is the time and place to have these conversations. The King's coronation is a time and place to have the conversations.
Exactly. And this is the point about Reconciliation Week, right? Is that every week is Reconciliation Week. Every day is Reconciliation Day. And every day is the appropriate moment to talk about Australian history. And if we can't talk truthfully about our history, and we haven't been able to, and this is what the Voice and Truth-Telling and Makarrata Commission are about, then we don't have the truth at the centre of our nation. And that's why we have to go back to the beginning, and we have to accept the dispossession. We have to accept the stolen land. And in doing so, we can release the chains that actually we're all under. Right? We're all still chained to that moment in a way, because we can't be truly equal until we look each other in the eye. And this is what the Voice and this year is about. It's to me, it's about all of us being able to look First Nations people in the eye and say, I said yes. I said yes to you. I said yes to you being worthy. I said yes to your culture being valuable. I said yes to, the stolen land. I said yes to you being lifted up. That's what it's about. And I think the final point about Stan, it's important for all of us to understand, is that Stan Grant could say things and I could say the same things, and I would not be attacked in the same way as Stan. And that's still the inequality, that's still the injustice, that's still the underlying racism that we have to deal with. And by talking about the Crown, which is very much at the centre of that conversation, Stan has rightly gone to the central nerve of Australian life and Australian history and Australian society. And he's incredibly courageous to do so, as is every First Nation leader in this country, because they are carrying such a great burden that I don't have to carry. That's why I'm saying to Australia now, we have to start to pick this up. What happened to Stan is not only about racism, it is about racism, but he went to the nature of the birth of post-colonial Australia. And that's the final discussion that we haven't been prepared to have. We have to have that to step forward. Voice, Makarrata Commission, treaty, that's what it's about. And once again, I'll say, I'm incredibly inspired that everyone in this room has an opportunity to make this profound change for former generations who didn't have the opportunity and for future generations.
Oh, that's really wonderfully said, Craig. Thank you. Semara, young people who are growing up learning the truth now in school, what's their reaction when they hear about what they're going to be asked to vote on at the referendum? What's their initial reaction when you educate them about the voice?
Yeah, a lot of young people are still obviously learning about our country's history. And like we took a small cohort of young people yesterday to the National Gallery, the National Museum, and we went and looked at that First Nations exhibit. And this really interesting truth of the shock, the reality of what they feel and what they know, but they don't necessarily have the articulation for, to understand why. Why is it that it's not equal, that I'm not valued, that I still experience a sense of disempowerment, a sense of hopelessness, right? Young people still feel that when they're talking about their own identity in our country. And that's actually a really challenging place to be at when you don't have the words and when you don't have the knowledge of our country. It's only in places and spaces that we make as adults for young people to listen and to learn and to listen to our eldership and all kinds of eldership, that these different perspectives help us to shape what young people will take forward. And unless we're having a conversation about this sense of shared history, the truth, the empathy, and making a literal choice in a moment, at every moment when we have these moments of reflection, to be able to decide, how will I continue to shape the country that I live in? What is the legacy that I will continue over my lifetime as a young person, being able to reflect and decide and think about that responsibility that is on our shoulders? Because everybody talks about young people are the next generation, they're the future, woo, you fly deadly. But at the same time, the really important piece of that knowledge transfer, of understanding our history, is fundamental. Because we will continue just face the same challenges and the same struggles unless we collectively share and make space for all different kinds of young people,
Semara, the mantra for Deadly Inspiring Youth Doing Good is embody the millennia of footsteps that came before you, which is that's a really powerful statement. How are you empowering the young people to do that?
I think it's this truth that it's innate in them, that there is this humility and this gentleness that we know exists in our young people. And they come with their naivety and their beautifulness of their hope for the world. And that embodiment of knowing what our culture teaches us in every single moment, and letting them explore it and embody those footsteps that have come before us, understand what has enabled them to have the freedoms that they have, and let them share it on social media in a good way, It's that beautifulness of this evolution, the next kind of step of our culture and our community in the way that we express who we are.
I often have conversations with young people and Indigenous and non-Indigenous young people, and when you kind of have the conversation about the voice of Parliament, they're like, and? Or like,
it's simple.
why don't we? Why? What?
Why hasn't it happened
We're
yet?
voting for it now. Why don't
Yeah.
we already have that?
100%.
Are you coming across those attitudes?
100%. Young people just going, oh, I thought that was happened ages ago. Like, it's really just kind of a shock to go, why doesn't this exist in our country? And that's the beauty of young people, right? They're willing to embrace change in a way that we need to step into. We need to learn and learn. This knowledge transfer is not just about us from our elders to our young people. It's also about our young people to us, right?
Aunty Geraldine, it's so important to frame, these conversations around respect and listening. And I had a chat with Minister Burney before she had to go off to her day, that's going to be appearing on the Midday News actually on Channel 10 shortly, about listening and respect and how important it is to centre that in all the conversations that we have at the moment. And with elections coming up in Victoria, the First People's Assembly, that is also would be an important aspect to it. So how important is it to sit and listen, even to someone that you don't agree with?
It's really difficult sometimes to sit and listen, but I've been around a long time, and the thing about it is that we have to listen to all sides of every story, and what we can do, and how we can influence those different or divergent opinions. We try and influence and let them know exactly what's happened. Well, we talked about young people. We talked about, knowing their history. Well, it's not just, it's not our young people, it's all young people in this country that really need to know their history. They're the ones that those, that we need to make sure that they aren't sprouting those divergent opinions or those racist comments or whatever. What we need to do is make sure that we're giving them the truth, that what we're telling them is the reason why, we need a voice, why we need them to be participants in the referendum, why that Semara was saying, they can't understand why it hasn't happened. We know why it hasn't happened, but young people can't understand that. They think that, these things are just automatically would be there for us, for them, for their generations, for, for the things that they want and that they need. So what we want them to be able to do is to when they speak to people, when they talk to people about what is required, to get that support for the Yes campaign, that they'll have the knowledge, they'll be able to tell, what it's like. They've lived being Aboriginal all their lives, don't worry. They haven't had the privilege. They haven't had the whole range of privileges that other people have had. So, and they've gone through racism, but to be able to explain to their peers, exactly what it is, why it is so important that we need, that voice. We need that voice for those past generations, our generations now, but most importantly of all, those next generations that our children are going to be producing.
Aunty, now that you are an elected voice in Victoria, do you get a sense that your position, it's bigger than you? That you need to, and I'm kind of projecting into the future when we do have a voice to Parliament that's enshrined in the Constitution, that elected members will have a sense that they are representing their people, and it's bigger than them as an ego or them as a personality, that their views have to represent?
I come from a family of 14, by the way. I'm the 11th child. I know my place. That I know the world and everything in it is much bigger than me. I know, and how I've been brought up, that what my particular place and what my particular part in the fight for Aboriginal rights was. My older siblings, they drummed it into me. They told me, you have to get out there and you have to do the work and you have to contribute. And you don't do it for yourself, you do it for your community. You do it for those younger people that are coming behind you. That it's so very important that what you put in place is not for you, Geraldine, it's for them.
Craig, we saw that on Friday, that it's bigger than one organisation, or it's bigger than one sporting code. There were more than 20 sports codes that united in Sydney and also Melbourne for a joint statement. They all pledged their support for The Voice. We mentioned earlier time and place. Some people would say there's no time and place for politics in sport, but what do you usually say to them? Because I'm sure that question comes up a lot for you.
It really does, and it's important to keep going to it and let Australia know that actually this country overwhelmingly expects sport to step forward in important moments around social change and social justice. In fact, only 3 or 4 months ago we did a groundbreaking research. An organisation with Goodsy is on the board, and David Pocock and Maddie Di Rosario. It's called No Second Place, and that research very clearly, overwhelmingly, I think it's well in excess of 80, almost 90% of Australians say, we expect to hear from sport and to see our sporting stars, and particularly our codes and our clubs, even more than the athletes, step forward in these moments when Australia is having to face big questions. More than that, aside from the fact that obviously politicians use sport all the time, and it's obviously, sport and politics go hand in hand and always have. Athletes are civil actors, athletes are citizens, athletes are Australians, and they also have privilege that gives them a duty to step forward in these moments and say something. I might say it was wonderful to see all of the 20 major sports coming out, but what I'd really love to see from them is to now engage all of the community. So football, for example, has over 3,000 clubs around the country, have over 1 million participants. And almost all of those million will be playing now through this period of the year. And so it's an opportunity now to feed those conversations that you just talked about and keeping the door open to people who do have concerns, legitimate concerns, and having those conversations through that sporting lens. And our sporting clubs are the glue of much of society. They're also deeply multicultural, and I might say I'm delighted to see so many multicultural organisations and communities in the room here this morning. That's critically important, because what's that saying is this room is Australia, and we all need to step forward together. Well, in sporting clubs, you see all the beautiful diversity of Australia, and it's there that we can come together safely. And I've heard in recent weeks talk about moving the conversation out of this house, and I think it's time for that. We need to get it out in the Australian community now, and people sitting down and talking to each other. It's become clear that the issue around The Voice is now being used for political purposes when it is for us. It is not just for First Nations people, it is for every person in this room, and it is for our children. It's ours to own, and it's ours to vote on, and it's us that should discuss it, a person to person. So through sport we can have literally hundreds of thousands of conversations around the country, and it is important to ensure that everyone around the country who feels uncomfortable or has concerns can voice them. Of course, that's entirely legitimate, but I think we have to do it on 2 bases. Firstly, that we agree on the ground rules and the facts. And so we can't have conversations where we have the diversions and the misinformation and we're arguing on things that aren't true. Yep. So the first thing is to agree that this is the reality of what the structure is, this is what we're talking about, this is the impacts, now let's hear everyone's concerns and talk about it. And the second is that everyone must come to the conversation with goodwill and in good faith. And at the moment we see some bad faith, I think, around the country publicly, but this room is about good faith. And every Australian of good faith who wants to do the right thing and to understand how to walk forward as a country genuinely together, it's up to us now to take hold of those conversations and make sure that we have them.
What about interest from around the world? Football Australia was one of the first codes to come out in support of The Voice. That was in September last year. And Michael Chaney recently made comment that a no vote may impact foreign trade and, the way the world looks on us. The Women's World Cup is coming up in July. That's a really wonderful avenue to be able to highlight the issues that are happening in Australia. What do you think about that? Do you think the world is interested in what happens down here?
Oh, deeply interested. You saw the coverage of Stan go right around the world. It took only a couple of hours and it was on CNN, you know, Stan Granny stepping down, what's happening down under. It's important. And so when the Women's World Cup is here, we're going to have the eyes of the world, over 1 billion people, I think 1.5 billion, maybe 2 cumulative eyeballs on Australia. And, you know, you saw last year, those who support sport, and most Australians do, we talked about the Qatar World Cup and we were very strident in our criticism of migrant labour rights or lack thereof, of LGBTI criminalisation and other things. And I think it's important, and I'm looking forward to having the conversation around the Women's World Cup about human rights issues in Australia. Well, this is the most fundamental this year. And Australians, you know, I think it's good for us to understand that First Nations or Indigenous peoples around the world have the basic right to self-determination, and to really unpack that for everyone as to what that means. And it's really simple. It just means being involved formally in decisions that pertain to your own culture, your own people, your own history. And that's exactly what the Uluru Statement and particularly the Voice is about. So I'm hopeful that the Matildas will step forward and have that conversation during the World Cup and talk to the world about the fact that we are now proudly taking these steps, as so many other countries have done. I mean, we're the only Commonwealth nation, former colony, not to have a treaty. And now we're saying to the rest of the world, yeah, okay, we get it. You know, we're courageous enough. These generations in 2023 are going to take this step. And you know what? We are deeply proud of being able to do that.
Semara, you hit on this a little bit earlier, that young people are dealing with a lot these days. There's a lot to worry about. There's cost of living. There's the impacts of climate change. Do you think the voice to Parliament, the referendum, gives some hope as to, you know, something that we can achieve in a positive sense in this country and move forward together? Do you think young people have a sense of being a part of something bigger?
I think they do. When we talk about moments in our history that have shaped and impacted their lives now, and we talk about it in a real sense of our own family lineage and our stories in our own families, they can see the impact. They can see it because they have those opportunities now, right? We talk about the impact of the 67 referendum, the abolishment of the exemption cards and all those kinds of things. That impact and that story that comes from our families. My grandfather carried his exemption card in his wallet to the day that he died. And so when we understand that impact of those policies, and then when we as a family have to have those yarns and those conversations about it, there is way more hope to go, if we did this, if we achieved this while we are alive, then imagine what happens the next generation, the generation after that, 100 years from now, 200 years from now. Our country will be vibrant, you know? We will be in a different place. And that's the hope that we have to hold on to.
I mean, in 200 years, the purpose of the Voice to Parliament
could look differently.
Could look different, but it will still be there.
That's right. There's a level of protection that we have never had before. Our voice is protected by this document, right? It's enshrined in the Constitution that, I mean, it's crazy to feel safe. Good one.
All right, this is the last moment for you to have your final reflections before we break the formalities and I hand back to JP. I would like to get you each to think about, you know, how do you protect yourselves in the months that we have ahead with all the different conversations and the encounters that we have, whether it's to one person who's driving us from A to B, or to in front of hundreds or thousands of people, or whether it's in the assembly chamber, wherever it might be. You know, how do we protect ourselves and make sure that we have that resilience and energy to keep going? And also, can you reflect on the theme of National Reconciliation Week? Karen, I think you really nailed it this year. Be a voice for generations. Craig, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll work back, and Aunty Geraldine, you can have the final say.
Okay, just quickly, there's probably two things. One is that's important for all of us in the next few months, and I believe the bill is going to pass today for the referendum. So really, historic day to make sure that we get the facts out and push back against things that are anti-factual. And, you know, we've seen a lot of disinformation, and we can't sit back and just allow that to be there and allow it just, Yes 23 or Reconciliation Australia, try and push back on those things. We need to do our own homework. I'd encourage everyone to read Thomas and Kerry O'Brien's recent book, Voice to Parliament Handbook, and in that is a chapter around all of the former transient or transitory forms of voice and why we now need to make this step. And finally, just for people to project forward to the next morning and just wonder, what sort of country, how will we feel? How will we feel after centuries of being able to, as I say, be courageous enough as a people, all of us, to make this really foundational step for respect and equality for our First Nations people? And what does that mean to the country? And it means that we can, for the first time ever in this country, we can look each other in the eye.
Just before we move on, Craig, I was sitting on a plane going to Melbourne, and I saw someone reading the Voice to Parliament book, and I leaned over, and it was you. You may have noticed I didn't say hello. I'm so sorry, I should have said hello, but you were engrossed in your book. But it was really great. I was like, there's someone reading the Voice to Parliament book, and it was you. Awesome. Okay, Semara.
I love it. I think in this time, I go back to what keeps us really strong. And it's our families, right? To keep our optimism, to stay true to what we're trying to achieve here collectively. Love each other. Just love each other, man. And good ways, have a laugh. This conversation is another kind serious. Like, so serious, right? But we're human. We love to laugh, and that's the stuff that you have to hold on to in these moments and not them gammon laugh, proper big belly laugh, right? Because it's what keeps us going, and it's what keeps us sane sometimes. I think, and then reflecting on the theme, this is not just about right now the young people that we can visibly see, the young people who are sitting there looking at us, making sure and holding us accountable to make sure that we are making the right decisions that will impact their lives. It's about those young people who we will never meet. That's why when we talk about Be a Voice for Generations, it's the ones you will never meet.
We also use music to get us through as well, singing and
Proper.
rap, dance,
Yes.
rap, singing.
No.
Maybe. Aunty Geraldine, I would like to give you the final say.
All right, I'm not going to rap. But it is, you said about, you know, how you get through it and all that we may hear and everything else. But do you know what? We've been copying that for generations. And what we've been able to do, we've been able to build resilience within ourselves. And what we need to do is we need to impart and ensure that we're building that resilience into those younger generations. You know, this voice is going to be for them. They're going to have to, I really am sorry, you young guys, but you're going to have to carry some of the load. People, I was really excited when Craig mentioned those billions of eyeballs on Australia during that World Cup. And thinking, and they're the things that buoy me up. They're the things that build me up. That we have an opportunity to showcase, you know, the change that we're making in this country. And really, it's just been, I think it's just been magnificent that what we've been able to do over these last few years. And particularly, you know, we have support of government. We're going to get that legislation through. We will have that referendum, and we will get that yes vote, because I am optimistic. Exactly what you say, Craig. You know, we'll do it. We can do it. We have the support. We have the support of people. We have that minority group that may say those, nasty, horrid things. But we have the group of all those people. You talk about we get into taxis. We get into taxis with people. We talk about the voice and the referendum, and yes, and they want it, and they want to be able to make sure that we do get it. You talk to all sorts of multicultural groups all over, and I've done dozens and dozens and dozens of talks to people in Victoria at like Rotary and Country Women's Association and those sorts of people, and they agree. They want change in this country, and I just believe that this is what is going to happen. The landscape's changing. It will, and we will get what we want.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. We're witnessing history. We are witnessing history throughout this process of bringing the referendum. We're seeing it this week being played out during National Reconciliation Week with the passage of Parliament going through the upper house. And we're seeing it today with this breakfast being held at Parliament House. And this is the first time we've also been on stage together. And it's been my absolute pleasure. Please thank Aunty Geraldine Atkinson, Semara Jose and Craig Foster.